10 locations, 10 separate encounters. And in every one, the footage gets harder to explain the longer you watch. From a paddleboarder frozen on the Payette River to investigators who knocked on wood and heard something knock back, these aren't recycled stories. They're first-hand accounts, expedition footage, and reports spanning decades of wilderness encounters across North America. Some end in eye contact, some end in a sprint. All leave the same question. What exactly was watching from the tree line? Let's get into it. The camera lens captures a flicker of movement near the dense tree line of the remote Uinta mountain range, where a massive, bearded figure with Viking-like facial features suddenly appears, then disappears almost as quickly as it registers on screen. The figure seems to blend into the shadows of the forest, standing motionless with a weight and presence that makes it difficult to judge exactly what is being seen. As the footage is scrutinized frame by frame, the silhouette suggests a stature and build rarely seen in the deep wilderness, raising questions about what exactly was watching from the periphery of a region long associated with Sasquatch reports. Deep within the same rugged terrain, another discovery stops the expedition in its tracks. A complex, deliberate structure, seemingly woven from heavy logs and branches, stands deep in the woods, appearing far too organized to be explained by a simple windfall or natural collapse. While the initial instinct is to attribute such construction to human activity, the sheer scale and the location, far removed from any trail or campsite, leave the investigators wondering who or what could have built it. Upon closer inspection, the grim reality of the site becomes clear. The carcass of a deer lies at the base of the structure, its ribs gnawed and broken in a way the investigators found difficult to explain, adding another unsettling detail to the scene. Silence envelops the remote lake as the researchers attempt to process the scene, but the stillness is interrupted by voices drifting through the trees, indistinct and impossible to place. Despite being miles from any known human settlement or other camping groups, the faint, indistinct sounds echo against the water, leaving the team scanning a shoreline they believed should be empty. Shortly after, the expedition discovers a series of tracks pressed deep into the muddy floodplain. These are not common animal prints. They are enormous, measuring roughly 13 to 14 inches long, with clear evidence of a mid-tarsal ridge, a feature that Bigfoot researchers often point to when identifying unusual bipedal tracks. The investigation into Meek's Cabin Reservoir brings to light a harrowing up-close encounter from years prior. A witness, while fishing at the south end of the lake, came face-to-face with a massive, dark brown, furry humanoid creature. This being, estimated to be 8 to 9 feet tall, was observed leaping over a solid wood rail fence with effortless agility while clutching a bundle of broken branches against its torso, a display of strength and coordination that stayed with the witness long after the encounter. The witness described a moment of intense eye contact, noting that the creature looked at them with a sense of wariness before vanishing into the dense undergrowth, gone within seconds despite its size. As the team from Rocky Mountain Sasquatch reviews these findings, the pattern of evidence, from the massive tracks to the mysterious bone-strewn structures, begins to suggest a persistent and elusive presence in the Uinta Mountains. These reports, often kept quiet by those who fear ridicule, highlight a recurring phenomenon that continues to challenge our understanding of what inhabits these high-altitude wilderness regions. Whether these encounters represent a single species or something else entirely, the evidence collected in this hot zone continues to draw researchers back to the same unforgiving slopes. So what do you think explains the giant bearded figure captured on camera and the gnawed remains found beneath those strange forest structures? The silence of Sasquatch Provincial Park is broken by a sudden rhythmic thud echoing through the dark timber, a sound too deliberate to be easily dismissed as something simply falling from the trees. Two investigators moving through the thick underbrush stop in their tracks as they realize the sound is not a natural occurrence of the forest. Whatever made the sound, it had gotten their attention. The atmosphere shifts instantly from a routine hike to a state of heightened alert as they notice the perimeter around them feels unnervingly active. almost as if something has noticed their presence. As the investigators delve deeper into the Deer Lake Trail area, they begin testing the environment, intentionally striking trees with wooden branches to see if the forest responds, a common technique among researchers searching for signs of a possible Sasquatch presence. For a moment, there is only the heavy, oppressive stillness of the British Columbia wilderness, the kind of quiet that makes every breath feel loud. However, the situation turns volatile when a response rings out, a definitive heavy strike against a tree, mirroring their own actions and sounding close enough that the investigators immediately question whether they have just heard something answer them. The investigators' reactions are immediate and visceral. Whatever was out there, they no longer felt comfortable staying to find out. The investigation is abandoned as they hurry back toward their vehicle, curiosity replaced by the instinct to get out of the area. This moment of audible interaction raises an obvious question: what actually made that second sound? The investigators later point out that, to them, it didn't sound like ordinary falling debris or the movement they would expect from local wildlife. But without seeing what produced it, there was no way to know for certain what had answered their knock. Returning the following day, the pair attempts to document the site where they had been camping, retracing their steps in daylight to make sense of what happened the night before. While reviewing their experience, the suggestion is made that they were not alone during the night, describing the feeling of being surrounded while they slept in the car.
Oh wait, what the is that? Dude, it hit back. It hit back.
Yeah, it hit back. Let's go again.
It hit back.
Yo, it hit.
Holy shit, it's hitting back, bro.
We gotta go.
No, holy shit, we gotta go, bro. Dude, what is that? Go!
Boxed in on all sides by something they couldn't see but could sense circling. The footage transitions into a tense, final sequence where, under the dim light, a shape is perceived in the brush for only a moment before disappearing, leaving the investigators unsure of exactly what they saw. The analysis of this encounter centers on the intelligence behind the wood-knocking behavior. For Bigfoot researchers, wood-knocking has been reported in other alleged Sasquatch encounters and is sometimes interpreted as a possible form of communication or territorial behavior. The fact that the forest hit back against the investigators provides a chilling mystery, raising the possibility that the response was intentional rather than simply a coincidence. While the visual evidence remains obscured by the limitations of handheld night vision recording, the audio synchronization between the investigators' initial calls and the subsequent response remains the core of this investigation. The researchers are left to grapple with the possibility that, in the heart of Harrison Hot Springs, they may have inadvertently made contact with something that prefers to remain hidden, a presence content to answer but never to be seen. What do you think answered their knock that night? Another animal, a natural sound, or something that was actually watching them from the trees? Deep in the ravine, the silence of the Cascade Mountains is abruptly shattered. Something large moves through the brush, accompanied by the distinct sound of heavy boulders crashing down the incline. The kind of noise that makes it clear whatever is moving is neither small nor particularly concerned about being heard.
I don't know what it is down here in the ravine. It sounds pretty big.
Alex Petakov, filming near a remote logging road outside Packwood, Washington, remains motionless as the rhythmic snapping of sticks and heavy, deliberate movements echo through the darkness of the ravine, each footfall seeming to carry with a weight that travels through the trees.
A loud movement in here. Down in here, I've been scared. I can hear the woodpecker up there.
Its size suggested only by the sheer volume of the impact and the aggressive nature of the movement through the dense undergrowth, close enough to hear, but far too obscured to identify.
I don't know what it is down here in the ravine. Sounds pretty big. Might be another woodpecker, I don't know. That's pretty loud.
As daylight breaks, the environment is surveyed via drone, revealing the rugged, isolating terrain of the Goat Rocks wilderness, a landscape so vast and unbroken that the previous night's encounter suddenly feels even more isolated against the scale of it.
I wasn't able to see what was making those sounds and that loud movement, so I launched my drone to survey the area. Just got done flying my drone around here. Absolutely epic shots. We're kind of on the edge. Well, that way, past this mountain I was filming is the Goat Mountain Wilderness. Goat Rocks Wilderness, I think it was. Huge designated wilderness area. It's a cool area. I mean, that noise I heard last night was interesting. Can't say anything definitively about it, of course, but we'll get it checked out on the audio, and it's just a cool area for sure.
What makes this encounter particularly unsettling is the consistency of the reports from this region. Longtime researcher Kirk Brandenburg notes that this specific drainage system acts as a natural funnel for wildlife, and human presence here is minimal, making the audible movement captured on camera all the more difficult to explain.
Well, the access is extremely limited. It's very difficult to get back here, number one. It's a long drive, and this entire system of drainage is all funnel out to right in this part of the valley that we're standing here and looking down into. You have at least 3 main valleys that funnel down here, and it's just, as you can see in front of us, it's just carpeted with this huckleberry growing, and it's all ripe right now. There's tons of food everywhere, animal sign everywhere, and it's the low access and the really rugged country, stuff that you realistically can't even effectively hunt. It's basically 40 degrees slope and down. It's just thick, and there's reports in here from the few people that are diehard hunters and spend a lot of time back here.
By the summer of 2025, a return expedition was launched to investigate a high alpine lake where local law speaks of a harrowing encounter from 1998. According to reports collected by the team, a pair of campers were forced to flee when they were reportedly surrounded by a creature that appeared to mimic language through impossible, unintelligible vocalizations and rhythmic, heavy stomping that seemed to move around their perimeter, the sound appearing to circle them from every direction at once.
So they kept on just hanging out, making noise, laughing. They occasionally hooted and hollered across the lake because the acoustics here are insane. And at about, he said late night, so I'm assuming midnight, he said he heard a yell come across the lake, and then the smashing of timber, and then 20 minutes go by of silence after the sounds had all stopped coming their direction, and they thought whatever it was had left, but they were really spooked. And this thing eventually just, boom, was making noise right outside of camp out of nowhere. And it was standing outside the perimeter of their camp, kind of rotating the backside of the hill and coming around their camp. It started doing, he said, language. Something talking in a language and with words you couldn't understand. He related to sounding like somebody who's very hard of hearing, has difficulty articulating and shaping words in a language he couldn't understand. Very emotional. It was very wrought and upset. And it would occasionally stomp. So it would go in one side behind their camp, make a bunch of noise, and it'd stomp intentionally super hard several times, and then it would rotate back the other way and repeat that. It was up there with them for about another 15 minutes, and it was just screaming its head off. I asked the guy to recreate the sounds, and he said he couldn't produce the sounds it was making. It was so intense and loud and unusual.
The goal of the 2025 expedition was to monitor this very basin using state-of-the-art thermal recording units, TRUs, to document whether these patterns persisted. The investigators, including Nathaniel Bronis, deployed these units to cover the primary corridors leading into the lake, positioning themselves to catch exactly the kind of movement the earlier campers had described.
On the perimeter, we have all the trees set up too.
Yeah, we've got
covering everything.
We got a true up in the woods over here. We have one over there, and we're gonna put probably a thermal camera pointed this way.
We have 2 audio recorders running.
Two audio recorders running.
And an audio on my head.
Right, we're bringing one with us. So if something happens at camp, it will be documented, and if it happens on our way up, it will also be documented. But I think the plan is, Ethan, you want to go up minimally red light and just stay quiet?
Yeah, we're going to try to creep up as quiet as we can to the lake. We made noise down here earlier to let things know that there was something going on, but maybe they're not expecting after it's dark that something like humans would come up to the lake. So we're going to creep up real quiet, and we're going to kind of maybe separate at the lake a couple hundred yards apart, and then just yell to each other.
During the night, while one of the researchers was stationed alone in camp, the thermal units picked up subtle movement in the vegetation, followed by a heavy, deliberate thud on the western side of the creek, a sound that, according to the team, did not align with the movements of smaller local fauna.
How goes it?
It eases the tension a little bit.
How's your evening been?
Something moved through up there on the slope, left to right, and then there's a heavy thud to the west.
Really?
Interesting. Well, the true is right up there.
Oh yes, that's correct. One's
So
running up
hopefully
there.
something is caught. What was the thud kind of like?
Just standard thud you hear in the woods sometimes. It could be a deer. You know, deers like to stomp their leg.
Yeah. But you have audio running, right? So
Yes, audio's running right in that chair.
Nice.
Despite the team's attempts to elicit a response using an unusual combination of animal vocalizations, the forest remained largely indifferent, yet the feeling of being observed persisted throughout the nights, a tension that never fully disappeared, even when the forest went quiet.
All right, that's what you call mixing it up.
Definitely.
Putting some sound out there.
I don't think anything here has ever heard of a hyena sounds
Right.
like.
That's the hope. And alpha male or even young Sasquatch, they'll be coming up here to investigate and figure out what's making that sound.
We've got audio running and we've got thermals, and we're gonna settle in and hopefully see if anything is intrigued enough by our unusual animal cacophony over here. With that said, eerie quiet, but time to settle in and just see, listen for a little while.
Upon reviewing the audio files collected during the quiet of the night, the team identified a low-frequency knock, a deep, heavy sound resembling wood striking wood that appeared to originate from deep within the thick forest, far from the campsite.
May have been an exciting night, apparently. I slept like a rock, but Sir Nathan believes he heard some stuff, huh?
Oh yeah, there was a loud knock last night.
And it actually woke you up?
Yeah, I startled awake, and then I tried to wake you guys up, and you guys didn't wake up.
This wasn't the rhythmic tapping of a pileated woodpecker, which the team had observed earlier in the day, and the difference between the two sounds was noticeable when the recordings were compared side by side. It carried a resonance that sounded consistent with a much larger impact.
There he is. There's 2 of them.
Yeah, okay, so there's one flying, one's knocking. Or pecking. So there's a pileated woodpecker here. So we could say, oh, that's a knock, but it's not. At least we know the source of it, and obviously the more you know about animals and the wildlife in your areas, the more you can avoid misidentifications. But that's kind of cool. We get to hear that and see the woodpeckers interacting with this old growth here. So there you have it.
The analysis of these audio signals led the team to suggest that the activity may not be random, but could follow a cycle, with the creatures potentially utilizing the high-altitude berry patches and water sources for only a few days at a time before moving deeper into the impenetrable ridges. A pattern that could explain why reported sightings in this basin appear to cluster around certain weeks of the summer.
My recorder is way farther away from the camp and through a bunch of thick forest, and I was woke up to a knock coming from down in there, and it was quite loud for me on the ground. But my recorder couldn't hardly pick it up, just a little bit, and we got it just enough to register that there's a punky, forearm thick sized log hitting another log. So yeah, but other than that, as far as we can tell, it was quiet. So
Well, either way, it's a cool area. Thank you guys for bringing me here. It was a great adventure, I think, no matter what, no matter which way you look at it. And the fact that we were, I can't get over the fact that we came up here because of this interesting report that you got.
yeah,
Kind of coincidentally, that's the reason that brought us here. So if it happened once, it can happen again, I'm sure of it.
Right, every place we
Experience
go,
something.
we found they're in a cycle,
Yep.
circuit, and they're only in a certain area once or twice a week.
Yeah,
for 2 or 3 days, and then they're out.
right.
These findings reinforce the idea that, while Sasquatch activity remains unconfirmed, the mountains are far from empty. The technology deployed, while primarily validating the presence of common wildlife like bears, continues to capture unusual sounds and movements that investigators say are difficult to explain through ordinary wildlife activity. As the investigation into these corridors continues, the question remains: are we observing the natural movements of an apex inhabitant that prefers to remain invisible, or something even more difficult to classify? So what do you think was actually captured here? The riverbank appeared deserted. A quiet stretch of slack water along the Payette River in McCall, Idaho. The kind of morning stillness that makes the wilderness feel almost harmless. Yet, as the paddleboarder drifted along the meanders, a sudden, inexplicable shift in the atmosphere brought him to a complete stop. Something in the air had changed, a pressure he couldn't name, and his instinct told him to stop paddling before his mind had even caught up to why. Across the water, roughly 70 yards away, two massive dark shapes stood perfectly still within a dense cluster of trees. For a moment, they gave nothing away.
I had the GoPro out and had just completed filming a 360 degrees around me. I stopped, set the GoPro down, and looked up into the woods across from me and saw two figures standing in a group of trees, roughly 70 yards across the river.
At first, they were merely silhouettes, blending into the forest shadows, easy enough to dismiss as stumps or shadow play between the branches. However, as the light shifted, the details became impossible to ignore. They stood side by side, upright and immovable, watching the witness with an intensity that felt deliberate, not the passive gaze of a grazing animal, but something closer to scrutiny. The figure on the left stood a full head shorter than its companion, both possessing broad shoulders and a total lack of visible necks, their long arms hanging down toward their knees, a proportion the witness felt no bear, no elk, and no known resident of the Payette backcountry could explain. As the witness, a federal law enforcement officer trained to observe and report with precision, studied the figures, he noted facial features that defied easy classification. They appeared to possess a rugged, primeval quality, heavy brow ridges and pronounced nose bridges that caught the light, reminiscent of a bizarre hybrid of a gorilla and a primitive human ancestor. It wasn't the face of anything he'd been trained to identify. The fur covering them was long and unkempt, draped over their frames like a ghillie suit designed for total concealment, making them seem almost perfectly suited to disappear into the surrounding terrain.
The details are sketchy. It was dark in the trees, but just enough sun poked through the clouds that it highlighted the prominent features of their faces, the bridges of their nose and brow ridges. I struggled to put the description of their faces into words. They both looked like they were wearing cheap, ugly gorilla masks, crossed with what I would describe as features of a Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon man. Gorillas crossed with a really old man. They had rounded heads, no neck.
They did not flee, they simply observed as if they were the ones conducting the investigation, a reversal that sat uneasily with a man used to being the one doing the watching. In a moment of panicked desperation, the The witness reached for his camera to document the impossible, but the mechanical failure of the device combined with his own overwhelming adrenaline cost him the chance to capture what he was seeing. When he looked back up just seconds later, the figures had vanished into the dense timber as if they had never been there, leaving him alone on the water with nothing but the memory and the silence pressing back in. Analysis of the event suggests the witness may have been observed long before he realized he was in the presence of something unusual. His report, cross-referenced as BFRO Report 78573, aligns with other historical accounts in central Idaho, where witnesses have described creatures that seem to lose interest once they understand they have been identified. The witness later noted a chilling change in the environment, feeling a sudden primal sense that he was no longer welcome in the woods, prompting an immediate departure, a warning his body understood before his mind could rationalize it. This incident is far from isolated in the Payette River region. A separate, harrowing account from 1975 involves a 15-year-old boy in McCall who investigated his hog pen after the livestock and horses began showing signs of absolute terror, rearing and screaming at a threat he couldn't yet see. Thinking he was confronting a bear, he fired a .30-06 rifle at a figure that stood 8 feet tall and 4 feet wide, which leaped a 5-foot fence while holding a 275-pound hog under one arm, a display of strength the witness believed no ordinary bear could account for. Despite a blood trail that stretched into the forest, neither the hog nor the creature was ever recovered. These encounters, spanning decades, paint a consistent picture of large, elusive figures described as physically powerful and capable of disappearing with surprising speed. Whether they are highly adapted forest denizens or something that defies biological categorization, the reports remain strikingly similar in their description of size, behavior, and the profound, lingering unease they instill in those who witness them. After hearing the account of such a direct observation by an experienced professional, what do you think this paddleboarder actually encountered in the trees? The stillness of a July morning in rural Connecticut was interrupted by an encounter that has quickly become one of the most talked about Bigfoot reports of the year. On July 5th, an eyewitness claimed to have observed a massive, unidentified figure near the edge of Patchogue State Forest, the largest state forest in Connecticut. What initially appeared to be another isolated report soon attracted widespread attention after the details were reviewed by investigators familiar with documenting unexplained wildlife encounters. The combination of the witness's detailed description, the remote location, and the consistency of the testimony has fueled renewed discussion within the cryptozoology community about whether the forests of New England could still conceal an undiscovered large primate. Rather than sharing the story casually online, the witness chose to submit a formal report to the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, BFRO, one of the longest-running organizations dedicated to collecting and evaluating alleged Bigfoot sightings throughout North America. According to the documentary, investigators carefully reviewed the account before assigning it their highest level of credibility based on the amount of detail and the internal consistency of the witness's observations. While the BFRO does not claim such reports provide definitive scientific proof, its credibility ratings are intended to distinguish detailed first-hand testimonies from vague stories, obvious hoaxes, or sightings that can easily be explained by known animals. The exact description provided by the witness has not been released in full, but researchers reportedly considered several factors before giving the report such a high classification.
All right, this one, you got to hear. A Bigfoot sighting in rural Connecticut on July 5th is now deemed credible by a research organization. Someone said that they saw him, but neighbors say they're not so sure. The sighting happened on the morning of July 5th near the state's largest forest. The Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization is dedicated to documenting credible encounters with the creature. So they say the eyewitness account was so descriptive, the researchers gave it their highest level of credibility.
These included the reported size of the figure, its movement, the surrounding environmental conditions, and the witness's ability to clearly distinguish the object from familiar wildlife. Investigators often compare new reports with hundreds of previous cases, looking for recurring patterns that appear across different regions and decades. When separate witnesses describe similar characteristics without knowing one another, researchers argue that these consistencies deserve careful documentation, even if they cannot yet provide conclusive evidence. Despite the attention generated by the report, residents living closest to the forest have responded with cautious curiosity rather than excitement. Among them is Richard Fedor, a longtime resident of Voluntown, Connecticut, who has spent nearly 30 years living beside the dense wilderness surrounding Patchogue State Forest. Speaking about the region, Fedor describes it as an enormous landscape, filled with thick forests, rugged terrain, wetlands, and secluded valleys where visibility can disappear within only a few yards. Even experienced hikers can quickly find themselves surrounded by dense vegetation, making the area feel far more isolated than many people expect from a northeastern state.
Resident Richard Fedor has lived in Voluntown, Connecticut for 30 years.
Every once in a while, if it's really quiet and still, you'll hear like a branch pop in the distance. You know, it makes you wonder, oh, what's walking around back there?
And he said the woods where Bigfoot was spotted has 26,000 acres and is a mix of thick, dense trees. It has several water sources as well. And he says if Bigfoot is in Connecticut, this just might be the most likely location.
Covering approximately 26,000 acres, Patchogue State Forest is Connecticut's largest public forest and contains countless miles of hiking trails, streams, ponds, and heavily wooded sections that receive relatively little human traffic. Large portions of the forest remain quiet throughout much of the year, creating an environment that naturally encourages speculation about what might exist beyond the well-traveled paths. While there is no verified scientific evidence that Bigfoot inhabits the region, the sheer scale of the landscape often leads enthusiasts to argue that unexplored sections could hide wildlife that rarely comes into contact with people. Fedor also points out that the forest already supports an impressive variety of wildlife. Black bears, bobcats, coyotes, white-tailed deer, foxes, and numerous smaller mammals all thrive within the protected ecosystem. The abundance of freshwater sources, including streams and ponds scattered throughout the forest, provides reliable resources for wildlife year-round. Some researchers speculate that, if an undiscovered large mammal were ever capable of surviving in the region, Patchogue would offer many of the environmental conditions necessary to sustain it. While this remains entirely speculative, the habitat itself is frequently cited as one reason the forest continues to appear in discussions about unexplained sightings. For long-time residents, however, the mystery is less about extraordinary creatures and more about the strange atmosphere that naturally accompanies such a vast wilderness. Fedor explains that hearing an unexpected branch snap or heavy footsteps echo through the trees is not unusual when spending time in the forest. Dense vegetation often prevents observers from identifying the source of unfamiliar sounds, allowing ordinary wildlife to create surprisingly unsettling experiences. These moments of uncertainty can easily leave visitors wondering whether they witnessed a common animal or something far more unusual. Documentary analysts examining the July 5th report emphasize that geography plays an important role in understanding why sightings continue to emerge from regions like Patchogue State Forest. Remote forests, limited visibility, and abundant wildlife create conditions where misidentifications are certainly possible. At the same time, these same characteristics also make it difficult to completely dismiss every detailed eyewitness account. The BFRO's decision to classify this report as highly credible reflects confidence in the witness's consistency rather than confirmation that an unknown species has been discovered. Researchers continue to document reports like this because they believe recurring patterns may eventually provide valuable insight, whether they ultimately reveal an undiscovered animal or improve understanding of how people interpret unusual experiences in remote environments. More than half a century after the modern Bigfoot legend entered popular culture, stories like the July 5th Connecticut encounter continue to spark debate among believers, skeptics, and curious observers alike. Without physical evidence such as DNA, a verified specimen, or unmistakable high-quality footage, the mystery remains unresolved. Yet reports from isolated forests continue to emerge, keeping the legend alive for each new generation of outdoor explorers. Whether the witness encountered an unidentified animal, misinterpreted a known species under unusual conditions, or truly witnessed something beyond current scientific understanding remains an open question. One thing is certain: as long as vast forests like Pachau continue to guard their secrets, stories like this will keep inviting speculation. If you had been standing at the edge of those woods that July morning, what would you believe you had seen? The tranquility of a summer day in Kelso, Oregon was shattered in July 1924 when a local miner named Fred Beck claimed to have encountered something that defied conventional description. According to his account, he fired his rifle at a creature he dubbed a mountain devil, causing the massive horned entity to plummet into a deep ravine. While the physical remains were never recovered, the incident ignited a sensation that moved from the local hills to the front pages of newspapers, sparking a debate that persists a century later. Could a giant, undocumented primate truly be roaming the dense forests of North America?
In early July 1924, near the town of Kelso, Oregon, Fred Beck shot a mountain devil. The creature we now call
Fred.
Bigfoot.
Fred?
You don't want to know what I've just seen. It's Mountain Devil.
Mountain Devil! You've been having too much of this moonshine. You want a little snow? They look like Fred. They have horns. Was it a boy or a girl, Fred?
Blasted it.
This question of potential hidden inhabitants remains central to modern investigations, particularly given the sheer scale of the Pacific Northwest wilderness. Stretching from Alaska to California, over 55,000 square kilometers of fertile, unspoiled habitat provide what some researchers argue is the perfect environment for a large, reclusive species to evade discovery. For the indigenous Quinault people, this creature, known as Bookwus, was never considered mythical, but rather a tangible, hair-covered being that coexisted within their ancestral lands, occasionally harvesting resources from the rivers and forests.
These remote forests run all the way from Alaska to California, 55,000 square kilometers of incredibly productive habitat. You know, I've never seen anywhere quite so unspoilt and fertile. Not much goes hungry here, and it was once the happy hunting ground of the Quagil Indians. Their name for Bigfoot was Bookwus.
The Bookwus is not really mythical. It's an actual being that's taller than a man, covered in hair.
What do they live on? How do they coexist with deer, bears, all of the other known animals of this region?
They live on a lot of plant life, fruit and vegetables, seafood, clams, and so forth. But they are known to harvest deer and to harvest salmon as well in the rivers.
Scientific scrutiny, however, remains skeptical, noting the total lack of fossil evidence for any non-human ape species in this region.
Culture stretches back hundreds of years, which is also strange because here in North America there's no fossil evidence for any ape species except man.
Yet, eyewitness accounts continue to emerge, such as the 1993 experience reported by Tom Seawood. While operating a spotlight on a beach at night, Seawood and his crew encountered two figures, a male and a female, that reacted to the light with distinct, coordinated behaviors. The female curled into a fetal position, while the male shielded his face, allowing the light to reflect off his eyes for several minutes. The witness maintained that the anatomy and movement of these beings were definitively not those of a black or grizzly bear.
In 1993, I went into an anchorage behind my ancestral village with my 3 crew, and just after dark, we heard whistling coming from the shore. And we hit the switch on the spotlight, and there it was, a male and a female, and she automatically dropped into a fetal position, and the male at the same time dropped down to his knees and brought his arm up. in front of his face, and you could see the reflection of his eyes, the green reflection from the spotlight. And they just stayed there for 15 or 20 minutes. I had the spotlight on them, and they froze. They did not move. But what I saw on that beach that night was, there was no way it would have been a black or a grizzly bear. I've seen blacks and grizzlies stand. No way could anyone ever say this is a bear to me, because I knew what I saw. It was definitely a buckwest walking across the beach.
To understand how such an elusive population could survive, researchers often look to mountain gorillas as a biological benchmark. Despite their shy nature and remote habitats, these primates are known to science and carefully tracked. The primary difference, however, lies in the Patterson-Gimlin film of 1967, perhaps the most infamous piece of evidence in the search for Sasquatch. Captured in Bluff Creek, California, this footage shows a bipedal, hair-covered figure walking with a distinctive, powerful stride before disappearing into the brush.
This is the start of the roll that they eventually got the picture of the creature on, yes. They're just riding their horses up the bed of Bluff Creek.
Is that Patterson himself?
Yes, that is, although usually you'll be seeing Bob Gilman because Patterson did most of the shooting.
He'd been making this film for some time. Was he much of a cameraman?
Strictly amateur. There's Bob now with the pack horse.
By any standards, it's a bit of a home movie, but then, with just a minute left on the film, it changes dramatically. So this was taken immediately after they saw it?
As soon as Roger got off the horse and got the camera out, yeah.
When analyzed by experts, the film has been subject to intense scrutiny regarding the possibility of a suit versus a biological entity. The movements, the fluidity of the muscle structure, and the deliberate gait have consistently confounded critics. As noted by those who have examined the original reels, there is no evidence of in-camera trickery, leaving the scientific community with a binary dilemma. The footage is either a remarkably sophisticated hoax or the most significant piece of wildlife documentation ever recorded. Whether viewed as a historical artifact or an unsolved mystery, the search for the creature persists, fueled by stories that stretch back through decades of wilderness exploration.
Whatever your first impression of this footage, there's no in-camera trickery. We've examined the original, and something really walked in front of Patterson's camera. And let's be clear about one thing. This footage either has to be a hoax or the most important piece of wildlife film ever.
What is your explanation for the phenomena described in these accounts? The quiet of a spring morning in 1962 was shattered when a 5-year-old child playing near the edge of the Wasatch National Forest in Utah found himself face to face with something he couldn't explain. It was an ordinary outing, the kind of family gathering that happens all the time until it wasn't. While his family was distracted by setting up a picnic just 200 yards away, the boy and his 3 friends had ventured toward a small mound on the side of the mountain to play hide and seek the way children do, wandering into terrain that felt safe simply because their parents were close enough to hear them. As the child rounded the mound, he was struck by the sudden chilling sensation of being watched, a feeling that stopped him mid-step before he even understood why. He turned to see a massive, hair-covered figure standing approximately 30 feet away, partially obscured by a large tree and scrub brush. The creature stood perfectly still, watching him with dark eyes, making no aggressive moves or sounds. Yet the boy felt an immediate, primal warning that the situation was unsafe, the kind of fear that needed no explanation. He slowly began walking backward before the tension snapped, and he broke into a sprint, screaming all the way back to the picnic site, his legs carrying him faster than they ever had before. Despite his terror, his father and the other adults attributed the sighting to a deer or a bobcat, though a follow-up search of the area revealed nothing. No tracks, no explanation, just an empty mountainside where a boy insisted something enormous had stood. However, the mystery deepened as the group prepared to leave. As the witness glanced back toward the mountain, he saw the same figure in the exact same spot, remaining motionless as they departed, as if it had never moved at all, simply watching them leave. Decades later, the witness's account was documented by the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, BFRO, which noted that the figure was significantly taller than his father, who stood 6 feet 2 inches, a detail that gave the childhood memory an unsettling new scale. The witness remained haunted by the encounter, noting that the term Bigfoot was not yet in common circulation, and that he remembered describing what he saw simply as a big, hairy man. Researchers have pointed to this detail when discussing the significance of older sightings. This incident in the Wasatch Mountains is not an isolated event. As highlighted by researcher Kelly Shaw, this specific corridor of Utah has been home to numerous reports throughout the decades. Local fish farms in the area have reported persistent, unexplained interference with their ponds, raising the possibility that wildlife or something else may be drawn to the area's accessible food sources. Just last spring, a separate group of people, 3 teenagers and an adult, encountered a 6-foot-tall figure while playing with soft guns 5 miles away from the original site. Unlike a fleeting animal encounter, this creature was reportedly seen lingering in the area, watching the group from hidden vantage points even after they realized they were being observed. Modern investigations into this region have yielded further curiosities, including the discovery of deliberate, large-scale wood structures. These formations, often found in areas with a history of sightings, provide another puzzling detail in a collection of largely anecdotal evidence. During recent field research in this same territory, investigators noted anomalous sounds, distinct thumps echoing through the forest that seemed to suggest something was moving or lingering nearby. The consistent nature of these reports across different decades raises difficult questions about what inhabits these rugged, forested slopes. Could these sightings be connected to a single elusive population that has remained largely undetected in the mountain brush for generations? Or could the geography of the Wasatch Range have contributed to a series of misidentifications that have continued for more than 60 years? So what do you think that 5-year-old boy actually saw standing on that mountainside? And why did it remain there, watching his family leave? The camera begins recording in the dense, silent backcountry of the Canadian wilderness, focusing on what appears to be an ordinary, undisturbed forest floor, the kind of shot that gives no warning of what's about to come. However, the scene quickly shifts as the investigator encounters a series of highly irregular tree structures. Trees, some of considerable size, have been snapped with immense force, appearing at first to have been broken by something other than traditional logging or ordinary wind. The bottoms of these trees are suspended in the air, while the tops remain attached, creating a chaotic, unnatural pile of debris, a configuration that initially looks less like ordinary storm damage and more like something was built or torn apart on purpose.
What the f... There's another one. This is like the bottom of a tree. Like, where would this have broken off from? These are all standing trees with the top still on them.
As the investigator navigates deeper into the valley, the environment becomes increasingly unsettling. He discovers what appears to be a flattened, organized nest or observation point hidden behind a cluster of broken timber, positioned with what seems to be a clear sight line over the surrounding terrain.
What is this? This could be like a nest or something. Like, it's kind of flattened out right behind this thing, like a nest or an observation point or something where they could hide behind.
The structural placement of the wood suggests it was deliberately positioned to provide cover or a vantage point, an observation that leaves the investigator visibly shaken. He notes that the area is devoid of typical wildlife, raising the possibility that something in the environment may have pushed the local fauna away, an absence that feels louder than any sound could have been.
Haven't heard anything, haven't seen any wildlife other than like grouse. And I am exhausted. I am exhausted. This hike is taxing.
This expedition into the remote valley serves as a high-stakes trial run, with the researcher supported by the Alberta Sasquatch organization, aiming to bridge the gap between anecdotal reports and physical evidence.
I think one of the things that keeps your mind at bay when it comes to fear on these trips is that a lot of the time you're only thinking about how difficult it is.
During his trek, he constantly scans the high ridges and banks, mirroring reports of creatures observing hikers from elevated positions, never quite able to shake the feeling that he is being watched from somewhere above.
The Sasquatch reports that come out of this area describes encounters where the creatures are observing people as they move up the creek. The Sasquatch observe from the high banks and the ridges, and they watch as the people move through to Ruby Falls. You can see one of these high banks in the background here, and you can guarantee the whole time I was hiking, I was watching these banks and keeping my eyes open for any movement and to see if anything was watching me.
The physical strain of the 25-kilometer hike is matched only by the psychological pressure of knowing he is miles from help, in an area where local trappers have described being watched by something that seems to possess an almost human level of intelligence and survival ability, stories that stayed with him long before he ever set foot on the trail himself.
To be honest, I was pretty nervous going into this. I was alone. I was going to be extremely far from my vehicle, far from anybody. The hike to the location I wanted to be in was about 25 kilometers. So I was really putting myself in a vulnerable position.
Later in the footage, the investigator finds a concentrated line of debris, with massive trees uprooted and thrown across the creek.
And either thrown or put there somehow. There's the root system, and the ground is more or less undisturbed. This is very weird.
Initially, the sheer force required to manipulate the timber in this fashion raises the possibility of a non-human entity, the scale of which is difficult to reconcile with anything short of deliberate, immense strength.
Where did that come from? Where did this break off from? This is broken and not chopped. But where did it fall from? These trees are all intact. A big pile of them right here, just a pile.
Upon further analysis of the terrain and the specific angle of the slope, the researcher transitions toward a more objective, documentary-style conclusion, identifying the scene as a likely path of an avalanche that tore through the valley during the previous winter. A rare moment where the evidence appears to point toward a natural cause.
After making my way up to the top here, and after doing some critical thinking, what this is starting to look like to me is an avalanche path. Pretty sure that's what it is.
This discovery highlights the difference between human, animal, and natural forces, yet the mystery of the area persists as the investigator continues to search for the elusive, legendary creatures said to congregate in these mountains before the first snowfall, when they are believed to become more active while preparing for winter.
And that's how it is. Like, they all gather where those big tree structures are. They say, okay, Frank's here. I don't know where Bob is. Maybe something happened to him. They basically gauge who's left, and then when the snows hit, they go.
Throughout the expedition, the researcher maintains a state of constant vigilance, utilizing night vision gear to scan for eyeshine or movement in the darkness. Every pass of the lens a fresh chance to catch something he might otherwise miss.
And a scan, like across the river, up on the ridge, because apparently that's where these creatures have been seen, is up on these ridges, like observing people as they come through the valley up the creek. So I did a scan, but I couldn't see anything strange.
Despite the absence of a direct visual capture, the encounters with strange high-altitude structures and the harrowing accounts provided by experts like Ken Walker suggest that this region remains a focal point for reported activity that continues to evade clear identification.
Bigfoot expert Ken Walker. Ken is probably the most knowledgeable person that I know personally in the Bigfoot field. He's like a library of anecdotes.
The investigator concludes his journey by planning a future, more immersive return, hoping that by changing his methodology from active searching to passive attraction, he might finally make his presence known to whatever is truly inhabiting this vast, isolated wilderness, trading the chase for patience in hopes of a different outcome.
A longer expedition to see if I can attract anything to my location. That seems to be the way to go. To not be constantly looking and searching, but to attract them to you, or to make them feel comfortable enough with you that they come in close and make their presence known.
So what do you think caused the strange broken tree structures discovered in this remote valley? The camera lens captures a flicker of motion at 1 p.m. on October 20th, 1967, deep in the wilderness of Bluff Creek, California, a moment that would go on to outlast every skeptic who tried to explain it away.
It's the footage. Here's the story that goes with it. It was around 1 p.m. on October the 20th, 1967. Patterson and Gimlin were riding north up the Bluff Creek in California. They rounded a bend and saw the creature.
As Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin round a bend on horseback, their composure vanishes. Patterson lunges for his Kodak camera, desperate to document a figure that defies simple explanation, scrambling to get the shot before whatever it is disappears back into the trees.
Patterson pulled the camera from his saddlebag and began filming.
What begins as a rhythmic stride across the creek bed soon escalates into a frantic, high-stakes observation as the two men move within 20 meters of the subject, close enough that every detail of its movement becomes impossible to dismiss as distant shadow or trick of the light.
He began to run closer, and as he did, Bob rode closer still, to within 20 meters of the creature.
As the subject continues its steady, deliberate pace, it doesn't flee in the manner of local wildlife. Instead, it maintains a singular, unbothered focus while being tracked by armed men, a composure that unsettled researchers for decades, since almost nothing in the wild holds its nerve like that under pursuit.
He covered Roger with his rifle until the subject walked away.
Through modern digital stabilization, researchers have been able to isolate the subject's movement, revealing an apparent musculature shifting beneath the hair.
We got it!
Using the latest computer technology, we've stabilized the film so it's easier to see. Now, you might think it looks like a man in a suit.
Detail that simply wasn't visible to the naked eye on the original grainy film. It is a sight that has polarized experts for over 3 decades. A bipedal figure with a stride length and weight distribution that seem to exceed the biological capabilities of a man in a suit.
The question is, which is it? From what we can see, the photo is pretty convincing.
Beyond the visuals, the environment provides secondary evidence. In the soft sand, the creature left behind massive footprints, impressions that stayed remarkably crisp, given how quickly Bluff Creek's sandbars typically shift and erode.
You'll glance back. For me, its behavior is definitely odd. Footage is one thing. The creature left traces, and to substantiate the film, there were footprints in the sand.
When compared to the impressions left by Gimlin's horse, an animal weighing 400 kilograms, these tracks were noticeably deeper, a detail that put hard numbers behind what witnesses had only been able to describe as enormous.
They were deeper than the ones left by Bob's horse. Each hoof would put down a weight of 400 kilos, but the depth of these prints suggests the creature was even heavier.
Plaster casts taken at the time measured 37 centimeters, yet the varying shapes of these prints suggest a complex natural foot action that shifts weight from heel to toe, the kind of subtle biomechanical variation researchers say is extraordinarily difficult to fake across a full sequence of steps.
Then they took plaster casts. Some measured 37 centimeters long. And this is one of them. So are these here the remainder of the cast that he made? Because they're very different, and they're obviously made by the same animal in the same place at the same time.
That's right. This probably represents the actual shape of the foot fairly closely, but sometimes the action of the foot makes a very different shape. This is another one that has a very strange shape. In fact, it's just the way that heel drove in and then shifted the weight up the front.
As primate anatomist Dr. Grover Krantz observed, the bone structure suggested by these impressions implies a creature far heavier than a gorilla, with a gait that requires a specific leverage only found in massive bipedal beings, a conclusion he arrived at only after years of comparative study.
Primate anatomist and Bigfoot author Dr. Grover Krantz has studied the bone positions in meticulous detail.
A human foot expanded to this length would have the bulges about here. This means the heel was relatively longer and the forefoot relatively shorter, which is just exactly the leverage required for a walking biped of about 8 feet or 2.5 meters tall.
Analysis of the movement remains perhaps the most contentious aspect of the encounter. The subject leans forward, bending its knees throughout each stride, keeping both feet on the ground for an unusual duration, a hallmark of non-human mechanics, a walking pattern that differs fundamentally from the way the human skeleton is built to move.
The movement has always been controversial as well. Grover Krantz thinks the gait of the creature is definitely inhuman.
The Patterson creature walks leaning forward somewhat and bends its knees most of the time, so that when it takes a step, it supports the leg with a bent knee and keeps 2 feet on the ground for an unusual length of time.
While skeptics often suggest a hoax, the sheer duration of the effort, sustained for over 300 feet of uneven, rocky terrain, challenges the possibility of human performance, especially given the total absence of stumbles, pauses, or any break in the rhythm of the stride.
For a short period of time, but the Patterson subject did it for at least 300 feet, and I don't think anyone could be trained to do that.
Could a person truly replicate such a complex biomechanical walk for this distance under the stress of observation, fully aware that 2 armed men were closing in behind them? The mystery is further complicated by the history of the site. In 1964, a catastrophic flood scoured the area, ripping away the landscape and leaving behind the vast, exposed sandbars that provided the stage for this encounter, a rare geological reset that opened up unobstructed sightlines across the creek bed for the first time in years.
And certainly nothing that looks like the area where the film was shot. But in 1964, there'd been a massive flood, and it had ripped out all of the scrub and deposited lots of sandbars here, and for once, it had created a window of opportunity for someone to see a mysterious creature.
This temporary change in the environment created a rare window of visibility, leading to a phenomenon that has gripped the world ever since. Whether this was a genuine brush with an elusive species or the most elaborate trick in history remains a subject of intense debate, one that continues to divide even experts who have spent entire careers studying the footage frame by frame. After reviewing the physical evidence and the unique gait captured that day, what is your conclusion? Could a human actor truly pull off such a precise, sustained performance, or were we witnessing something entirely different? A sharp, percussive crack echoed through the dense, rain-soaked timber.
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
We gotta get going.
Roll that one.
Got it?
Yeah, that was.
That's literally what I was looking for.
That is?
Yeah.
No. Dude, that's terrifying. We just started filming because we heard a very, very loud knock.
The sound was deliberately a heavy, singular strike against a standing trunk, and it was followed almost immediately by the unnatural stillness of the forest. The investigative team navigating a remote trail in the Pacific Northwest stopped instantly. There were no hikers, no logging crews, and no obvious source for such a heavy impact in this isolated wilderness. The audio recording captures the sudden tension as the environment, previously filled with the ambient noise of dripping rain and foliage, fell into a complete, unnerving silence. As the team pushed deeper into the brush, the atmosphere shifted. Movement was detected just beyond the periphery of their light.
There's something over there. Do you hear it? Yeah, dude, what the is that? You okay? Did it not sound like something was moving?
Yeah, it was like something broke.
Oh, breaking branches?
Yeah. So a lot of the times, supposedly, Bigfoots are thought to be super territorial.
The sound of heavy boughs snapping under pressure suggested something of significant mass was tracking their parallel path through the thicket. Every time the researchers attempted to communicate with calls, they were met with an unsettling, rhythmic response. A series of knocks and localized rustling that echoed the human-made sounds they had just produced.
Is that not what we heard?
Yeah, that is exactly one smack.
One smack.
Is that normal?
No. Nothing else would do that.
No, I know, but is that like something you would hear?
Moving toward a section of the forest characterized by an unusually open clearing, the team discovered a cluster of timber that defied natural explanation. Massive, mature trees had been snapped midway up their trunks as if crushed by a powerful downward force.
That looks right. Oh my god. Why are those trees just snapped off like that? This is like a way open area. Yeah. Look at these, dude. Look at these trees. They're just snapped off. That's crazy. Look how many are snapped off. This is crazy. Dude, look at this. They're legit just snapped off.
This might be where the knocking that we heard came from.
True.
These were not signs of a natural storm or simple rot. The splintering patterns were consistent with immense physical leverage. While investigating these broken sentinels, the team's electromagnetic field equipment began to spike, suggesting a localized, unexplained energy flux in an area that should have been devoid of any electrical interference.
I'm serious. I don't know if it was a person, but it sounded like, well, what? Like that. Okay, continue. I don't.
There have been a few instances where people who were out looking for Bigfoot had weird electromagnetic signatures that they recorded. Also, their cameras would glitch out, things would stop working, electronic equipment, lights, things like that will stop.
Dude.
Yeah, it's almost like they don't want any of that to work. So, we're literally miles and miles and miles deep in the woods. There should be zero reason that EMF meter would go off, unless of some crazy geomagnetic anomaly.
As the night deepened, the auditory evidence grew more complex. Sounds that resembled vocalizations neither animal nor human drifted through the valley, often appearing to respond directly to the team's presence.
I went, here?
I just got weird microphone interference.
Really?
It started ringing.
What? This is crazy, man. Yeah, this is scary. Okay, keep going.
The team reported an overwhelming, musky, and sulfuric odor that seemed to permeate the immediate area, a phenomenon frequently cited in reports involving unidentified, large-bodied cryptids.
You'll get that sulfury, musky, dirty.
Really? Whoa, okay,
You
check
can
this
smell
out.
it.
I had you guys walk down the way so that I can have the thermal pick us up just in case if anything's coming on this trail. I'm gonna let everybody know. This trail is very dark. The only lighting we have is what we have here.
Yeah.
As I was walking, I smelled like a rotten smell.
Yep.
No way. I don't know if it's like a dead animal.
I
Like
hope.
maybe like just like a small animal that's dead off to the side, but
That's the smell. Like, imagine one of us never showered your whole life. You ate, meat and with your hands every day, and you just stink.
Should we make some calls?
Despite the lack of visual confirmation on the thermal camera, the proximity of the sounds suggested something was not only observing the investigation, but actively participating in it. Following a brief retreat to recalibrate, the team moved to a second, water-adjacent location.
I don't know where to point. Yeah.
mind. That. Oh my. Did you just hear that? Hang on. Can you hear that? So we caught it. Try to be quiet. Try to be quiet. Wait. Did we just catch that?
The decision was based on the premise that such entities often favor the intersection of high ground and running water. Upon re-listening to their audio captures, the team realized they had recorded a distinct, intelligible voice or vocalization that appeared to mimic the structure of their own human communication.
Should we call back?
The recording, captured on a primary camera rather than an auxiliary device, removed the possibility of it being a simple trick of the wind or audio interference. The final minutes of the investigation were marked by an intensified feeling of being followed. As they neared the edge of the woods to return to their transport, the heavy, rhythmic thumping of something large pacing behind them became audible once again.
Let's give it some time. If this isn't right, maybe we try the second area. It's raining really heavy. We have quite a bit of a walk to get back to the car just to get to the second spot. I just thought about that. Hello! Do you hear that? Is that just walking? This is freaky. This is how you look for Bigfoot? Yeah.
The footage serves as a stark, objective document of a pursuit that left the team unable to find a conventional biological explanation for the presence they encountered. While the thermal imaging remained largely inconclusive due to the density of the foliage, the combination of physical tree damage, electromagnetic anomalies, and vocalized responses presents a compelling case for an undiscovered, intelligent entity. Whether the team had stumbled into the territory of a reclusive, unknown species, or something that defies standard biological classification, remains the central question of the investigation. What do you think was captured here? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.